Okay. Now, a few of you have mentioned this was a lot to read. Well, tough. No, I don't really mean that. I'll go and reopen it for a few more days. Give you a chance to catch up. Didn't get through all this. Frankly, I thought they could have used a good editor on the last half of the book. I think they probably could have covered the same material in about half to 2/3 of the number of pages. But hey, who am I to talk? So, and publish it. They actually, ironically, one of the problems they probably had is that publishers don't like thin books. They don't like thin tech. Well, they do now, but back pre-tech crash time, pre-2000, they liked like 600 and 700 page books because they could charge $50 for them, and people thought they were getting something very hefty. So let's talk about the rest of Peopleware here. Growing productive teams. This is the holy grail in software engineering. It's not just finding good people, it's building good teams. Because most software projects require more than one person. If a software project only requires one person, then the ideal team size is frankly one person, maybe two. Hand stuff off and bounce ideas. I'm one of those people who I don't tend to think great thoughts by myself. I work best when I have someone smarter than me to bounce stuff off of. And they point out the flaws, and they say this, and what about this? It's like, yeah, that's good. One of my best friends, all the way from my freshman year of high school, is Alan Scribner, who's brighter than me. And one of the things I appreciate about Alan is he always comes up with ideas, and I think, huh, that's interesting. He's been feeding me good ideas for, okay, that's scary, 50 years. 51 years. Never get old. Anyway, well, it beats the alternative. But you'll be surprised at how fast it creeps up on you. So, the best work groups are the ones where people have the most fun, perform at the upper limits, team interactions are everything. This is the challenge, is building a team, getting people to like each other, getting them to work well together, to have fun. So you have, it's interesting because DeMarco and Lister they're quite frank in the book. They said it's far easier for us to tell you all the things that will kill a team than how to actually guarantee to build a good one. And they're right. I've been in a lot of different environments. Pages, which I've said time and again, best team I ever worked with, we almost ripped ourselves apart relatively early on. We almost fell apart completely. And it was thanks largely, frankly, to Rick Gessler, one of the team members, who had some training in how to talk nicely to people that you vehemently disagree with. And he basically did an offsite and taught us all how to do that, and we all agreed to implement it. And it actually solved probably 80% of the problem. And then we had the offsite that I already talked about aligning personal goals with team goals. And between those two, with one exception of someone who we ended up firing after 2 years, we all got along quite well. Doesn't mean we didn't clash, didn't disagree, didn't have strong arguments, but there was nothing personal about it. The focus was, we're trying to get the technology done. Here's what we need to do. So some of the things the aspects, and now these are things that reflect a gelled team. These aren't things you can necessarily say, okay, we're going to have low turnover. There are things you can do to try and ensure low turnover. There are things you can do to try and build a sense of identity, a sense of believement, joint ownership, obvious enjoyment. You have to respect each other and have fun together. And sometimes that's just hard. Case in point, and pardon me for dragging this in. 2 years ago, the BYU football team went 8-4 in regular season, and the 4 games that it lost by a total of 8 points. was 8 points, well, actually, before 12 points away from being undefeated that season. And then, largely the same team, some turnover, but not a lot, went 4-9 last year, and frankly, they're not looking nearly as good as we thought they would look this year. On the other hand, the team this year went to Wisconsin, beat Wisconsin at Wisconsin. And then they, looked awful. They looked awful against not just Washington, but against Utah State. And frankly, they looked awful against NIU. And you're talking about same plays, same coaches, same people. There are differences on how the same team will perform on two different projects. This is a challenge. Note here, and actually, who was I talking to right at the break about stuff at your work? Teams are not automatically motivated by company goals and may be disdainful of them. This is the thing I talked about, my sister saying, don't they realize they're dealing with growers? Companies will do management by objectives, or we have to do this, or it's important that our company achieve this level of revenue in the fourth quarter. And it's kind of like, we're just trying to build a good product here. It's up to you guys to sell it. And up to you guys to figure out what product will, in fact, help us achieve those sales goals. But don't put on our heads your shortcomings and failings. At least that's how as engineers we tend to see it. Okay, things that kill teams. Defensive management, distrust, and micromanagement. How many have had the experience in your relatively brief career so far of having managers come in and try and micromanage what you're doing as a programmer? I was expecting your hand to go up. Finn, tell me about some of your experiences. Finn, we'll start with you.
I'm so sorry. I thought that everyone would be in that boat. But,
No, well, actually, a number of other hands went up. No. I just know from your previous comments, I suspected you had a story to tell there.
I once had a team lead just go through my code, and then, even if it was done correctly, he would want it done a different way. It was his baby, it was his project, so we would, redo everything. And waste a lot of time just all the time because it had to be his way, and I don't know.
And that can be very real. Other experiences, yes?
I had one person, he was technically a business partner, not a manager. We came up with the idea for everything together, but I was basically the only programmer for it. And he was constantly looking over my shoulder, trying to asking me all the pieces of what I was doing. And then he would spend 20 minutes telling me about his vision for things. And then I would try and get back to work. And this kept happening over and over and over again. And eventually what ended up happening is I just, I quit the project, and he ended up dropping all the code that I had spent months writing and just redid it himself, even though he wasn't a programmer.
Oh, okay. A few other examples. We have a lot of things to go through here, so yes.
About the furniture police, or
Oh, yeah.
yeah. What was the term for that? I can't remember.
The furniture police.
Yeah, furniture police. So these are the types of managers who'd go around and oh, this doesn't look uniform. I don't like this. And so in my internship this summer, there was a guy that came around and he saw that we had the lights out where our team is lots of wide open windows, lots of light. You just get natural light. It was great. He didn't like that. He wanted the lights on. So my boss had a conversation with him and tried to be no, there's no reason why we need that. Well, the next day, it turns out that he got the light switch taken out, and he got the lights plugged in automatically so that no one could turn them on or off.
Oh, that boggles the mind, but it doesn't surprise me at all. let me tell you, while I'm thinking about it, you're talking about this, brought to mind someone I was working with, oh my gosh, probably 20 years ago, I can't remember who it was, who told me, he said, this is the work, let me describe to you the worst work environment I ever had. He said, I had this previous job for this company programming. He said, we had our supervisor and 3 of us programmers. He said they had us all in one office with desks that all faced each other. And he said, if I was not hunched over typing something, my boss would glare at me. I thought, this is hell. I'd be gone. I'd be gone after like 2 days. It's like, no, I'm not going to sit here and work with you glaring at me because you don't like what I'm doing. One more here, yeah.
I had a coworker who was promoted to team lead, and before that, things had been pretty good. Like with the team, we all enjoyed, like we talk at times, but then, you know, when we work, we'd work. But as soon as she came to team lead, it was if you were not working, like even if you just started talking to someone, she was on you, she was looking at you, and we're just like, okay, you used to be here with us, but then it went to her head that she needed to make sure everything was as efficient as possible. And so because of that, I ended up leaving my job. That was the main factor I left that.
Yep. Actually, it brings up 2 points. One we've already talked about. What's the #1 reason why people leave jobs? Their immediate manager. The other is a comment that we'll get to later in this section, which is where DeMarco and Lister say, most organizations don't set out to kill their teams, they just act that way. And it's remarkable how often it is. Okay, bureaucracy, paperwork and busy work. I told you the story of Eric where their development process occupied like 3 or 4 binders and was so intensive that developers had 1 day a week they could program, Tuesday. And the whole rest of the week was tied up filling out the forms and going through the steps of the process because they're trying to do weekly bills, but they're trying to do weekly bills with this enormous, basically a process that was set up for bills like every other month or something. So they spent all their time doing methodology and only 1 day a week doing programming. Physical separation, dividing a team up. Now, it's possible with a good team, with good tools to work in a distributed environment, but often companies will separate teams not because it's increasing productivity, but because they don't want to spend the time or money to put everyone in one place. The ideal environment, frankly, in my opinion, is one where every engineer, an engineer, or maybe a team of 2 or 3 engineers have a office with the door that closes, and they also have a place where they can meet and talk. Companies resist that, even though it's been shown time again to be the most productive thing, and they will divide up teams between buildings simply as a cost-saving maneuver. Anyone been through that? No. Just wait. Fragmentations of people's time. We've talked about flow. What happens if you've got 3 different projects you have to work on? And you've got people who have meetings for those 3 different projects, and people who are sending you emails and want you to write documentation or memos for those 3 different projects, or who have other things going on. Shipping a bad product. I was just having this conversation with someone before class that, yeah, I was thinking it was you, but one of the things, as engineers, you want to ship good stuff, don't you? You want to ship quality code. Yeah, sometimes you just want to put a bow on it and push it out the door. I understand that. But you take pride in your work. And when your company or your manager forces you to deliver crap because they're not willing to take the time necessary to do it right, it's extremely demoralizing, both individually and as a team. How many of you have been through that? Anyone? Any story you want to tell? No. You guys are all like, yeah, get through the lecture, get through the lecture. Phony deadlines. Oh, yes.
I had an experience with it. I was in charge of like basically making this UI interface and stuff, and this application, and basically adding a bunch of functionality to this already existing application. And so we had planned for like a status meeting that like some Wednesday or something, like in the afternoon. That's a status meeting, and I had everything ready like before. And then that morning I said that to my supervisor. It was like, everything's ready, here it is, and stuff like that. And he's like, okay, let's add like just one more thing. Right, and it was like, I had like a couple of hours to add it. But he's like, well, but we need to show it to them, like to the users basically. So I was like, all right, do my best, I guess. And so I added what I could, and it worked, but it wasn't great. So like he's demoing it to the user, and they're like, yeah, we just asked him to do this, so it's not working great right now, but this is what we have so far. It's like, well, you could have just like waited like another day or something, and I would have been able to do a much better job.
And that actually gets to the next item. Phony deadlines based on company desires, not reality. That's the classic, you know. And my daughter Crystal has said she's run into this at her work. She likes her company, but she said, you know, we had a new CEO who said, I'd rather ship crap on time at the end of the quarter than take longer and make it work right. And I thought, what a way to demoralize your entire development workforce. I mean, that's how you drive people away. And then she actually started looking around for another job. She's staying there for now, but we'll see how long that lasts. Click control, breaking up teams out of fear of loss of control. You get a very effective, feisty team. Sometimes you'll have managers who say, well, you know, these guys are too smart for their own good. Let's break them up and spread them around different teams. Have any of you had that experience? Not that you've had, probably haven't been out there, but it happens. Oh, here we have the quote. Most organizations don't set out consciously to kill teams, they just act that way. And it's true. Phony motivation. This is back, the story I tell at Pages that I've told you before, that you know, we're trying to get this thing out the door, and the CFO and CEO are thinking, well, you know, let's say that if, you know, they ship by Christmas, we'll give everyone bonuses and time off, and if they don't, then we're going to cut pay or so on. And my comment to them was, you guys are idiots. Well, I didn't say you're idiots. I was kidding. I said, this is stupid. I said, these people have been working 70 hours a week, sometimes longer, for years. You think that they need motivation, that, you know, they need a threat or a reward to somehow they will magically work harder than they've been working for the last few years? And this is one that triggered my sister when she heard about it, say, don't they know they're dealing with grown-ups? And sometimes they don't. They think, you know, extended overtime. Oh man, the overtime issue. The heroic model of software development. Just this morning, I was on Kotaku. That's the Gizmodo computer game site. And they had this rather lengthy article about the intense development effort of Rockstar to get Red Dead Redemption 2 out. And I left a comment and said, there's nothing here that's unique to Rockstar or games. I said, this has been an issue in the software industry for decades. I was dealing with this 30 years ago. I was dealing with it 20 years ago. I said, it's called the heroic model of software development. A lot of companies think that, you know, they can do it. And of course, what DeMarco and Lister have already said is, you can do it for sprints, but once you get beyond a sprint of maybe a few weeks or even a month, you're no longer gaining productivity. And you get about 40 productive hours, and you spend the rest of the time finding other things to do because they're burned out. You have the issue, we're back to the armor issue. You're trying to mandate through overtime the discovery process. And the discovery process doesn't compress that well beyond a certain point. Sometimes it just takes time and thought and exploration and stumbling around. Pitting team members against each other. Have any of you ever run into that in your jobs? Having managers who sort of say, well, you know, so-and-so isn't pulling his weight. You whack them upside the head. Or someone does that to you. Now you go, boy, is that good. It'll happen. Yes?
Do you know of any examples of workplaces that have like a shorter work week or you work typically less than 40 hours and what the results of that are?
Who was just talking to me about that? Is it you? Oh, it's you.
There was a study being done right now, and I think it was Australia, where they're paying 40 hours and doing 30-hour work weeks. I don't know if that would ever translate out here in the US, but they are finding that they are being effective. But again, it's one study, so you have to probably do more into just one company.
Sure.
My daughter Crystal says when she works from home, some guy T-boned her in an intersection, so she's home with a fractured hip right now. and working from home. But before that, she was working from home a couple days a week. And she said, when I'm working from home, I put in about 6 hours, and I get everything done that I need to get done this day. Because no one's bothering me. She says I can ignore emails, I can ignore messages. I just start working, and she's curled up with her Australian sheepdog and just cranks away. Yes. Yes.
So, I don't know if this goes along the same lines as putting team members against each other, but I've heard that if you put the testers on the same team as the developers, then their ability to test the code properly just like falls off. So,
This is something Chuck and I learned. Chuck actually worked in quality assurance at Novell many years ago. It's, do you have the quality assurance integrated and sitting right with the developers? Do you have them as a separate team and so on? The short answer goes back to the diagram I gave you, that quality assurance is not just testing. It needs to be integrated in every point you need it. And as the next book we're reading, we'll talk about in a second, Accelerate. When you're talking about automated testing, continuous integration, continuous development, then it's really less of an issue because most of the tests are automated, so it's not that the quality engineers get buddy-buddy with the developers. It's, did your program pass the test or not? And the focus there is trying to write sufficient and sufficiently complete tests to be able to trust in the automated tests. I am a fond member. I am a fan of the separate QA and development environments. I believe that we underpay quality assurance people and that they are often pressured to do a poor job in order to meet arbitrary deadlines.
yeah, the example I heard was that a company that had been doing really well with their product had been outsourcing their QA to another company. Then they decided to
Bring it in-house.
yeah, and that's when their
Yep.
products.
This remains an issue. Okay, yes.
I just want to ask about that black team from the
Yeah.
book example. What kind of volume did they go through? It didn't really mention. It just seemed like they were the one team for the whole company, but part of me thinks they were just a particular team.
I think they were, as I recall from the book, they were a particular team, but they were a team that was, tackling key in-house development projects and getting them done on time. Part of the issue here with a lot of development groups is, getting back to my daughter Crystal, one of the reasons she loves her work and has stayed there is that she's on a really good team. She has a great manager who's gone to bat for her, who has supported her. She really likes her team members, trusts them, and they all work really well. And pretty much it's sort of, they are a team against some of the idiocies from higher up in management. And their manager does her best to protect them from those idiocies and to make sure they get rewarded for what they have. So it's, it's going to depend on the organization. How big is the software team? Well, how big is the project? How well can it be subdivided? And how do you manage the complexity? This is sort of more, I want to say touchy-feely. We did things at Pages. Some of them were by the CEO. There was a day we took the day off. Took the whole team bowling. I still have, and then this is shortly after we'd moved to our new offices. And basically our office numbers were whatever we scored that day. And I still have a little plastic thing that was mounted outside my office and it was my bowling score, which wasn't terribly great. We did another offsite, just the engineering team, when Terminator 2 came out.
Yes.
We all took the day off and went down to the theater and all sat and oohed and awed over the computer graphics, which were pretty stunning for the time. They really are. In fact, they still hold up amazingly well. That's been 20 years. So we would do stuff like that. We would do things as a group. Chemistry for team, they're basically repeating a lot of the stuff you're doing here. Cult of quality, provide closure, sense of eliteness, preserve and perfect successful teams, yada, yada, yada. Provide strategic but not tactical direction. In other words, don't micromanage. Fertile soil, you know, let's see how many things I can stutter about. The knife's edge you dance on in software engineering is the risk and ignorance. The greater reward comes from doing something that hasn't been done before. And the more you're doing something that hasn't been done before, the bigger the potential payoff, but you don't know for sure if it will pay off. It's possible to spend time developing stuff and putting it out there, and it turns out no one wants it. How many apps are in the Apple App Store? A lot? Billions? Hundreds of thousands at least. How many are actual profitable? Relatively, compared to the number in there, relatively few. And it's not all because some of those apps are bad. Some of those apps that aren't selling, I suspect, are actually very good apps. But the issue, I don't think I've told you this story. I try not to repeat myself, but hey, there you go. I'm 65. Back when I was writing for Byte, Byte was the premier PC magazine. I had one of two major columns in there. The other one was by Jerry Cornell. So I was extremely visible across the whole PC industry. I would do reviews. I'll tell you sometime about the negative power of that. And I was going to speak. I was giving a talk at the Amiga Developers Conference. And I had someone come up to me and say, you know, God, this column, you get to write 4,000 or 5,000 words every month and review all these products. How did you get to that column? To get that column. And I laid out the process. I had started writing for a small magazine called The Space Gamer, a column on computers and gaming. And then another gaming magazine. Is anyone old enough here to have read Computer Gaming World? Yeah, well, it died a few years ago. It started back in 1982. Russ Sipes started. He was familiar with my column in Space Gamer, so he said, "Can you write a column for me as well?" I said, "Sure." So I was writing for both of them. And Forrest Johnson, who was the editor of the Space Gamer, went to a computer magazine called Soft Rock for the IBM PC. And he approached me and said, "I know you're really into the Pascal programming language. Can you write a Pascal column for us?" I said, "Sure." I started doing that. And then I hooked up with Wayne Holder, who did the Word Plus Spelling Checker, which got a great review and was very successful. And it was reviewed by Phil Lemons, who is West Coast editor of Byte Magazine, and then became editor-in-chief. So I got to know Phil Lemons, who became editor-in-chief of Byte Magazine. And Phil decided in 1985 that he was looking for another technical columnist, basically to go alongside Jerry Cornell's column, and he asked me to do it. So I started writing this column. So I explain all this to this individual at the conference, and he looks at me for a second and says, "So what you're telling me is it's luck in who you know." I was like, well, wait a second. I've spent 5 years writing. I did this and did this. But on further reflection, I could not argue much with him. An awful lot of success in software and writing, and publishing, and other fields is luck in who you know. One might say fortune instead of luck. And, there are all sorts of aphorisms about, luck favors the prepared and so on and so forth. But the truth is that there are apps and applications and software companies that have been enormously successful, perhaps undeservingly so, and there have been others that have failed undeservingly so. So be aware that when you get out there, particularly if you go into commercial software, either as startups or with these established products, that there is a big risk-reward factor that you're having to face. Don't waste people's time. Fertile soil, making change possible. I assume you read all this. If you didn't, finish reading it. All this stuff too. Okay, next class. See, I'm letting you out here. Oh, yes.
I just have a question about
Oh, sure.
the meeting. So one of the things you said about the meetings was, like one job I guess you have as a manager is to get basically the status, right, of how projects are going. And so a meeting sometimes is like a status meeting, but you're like individually talking to people, so you're wasting other people's time when you're talking to one individual. So is he suggesting to just go to that, like basically like set up a meeting with just like each individual person, or like to go to them, or like what? 'Cause, I mean, you still need to get.
Well, the question is,
yeah.
first question is, do you need a meeting? As opposed to you need an email saying, here's what I did yesterday, here's where I'm at, here's what I need to do today. So there are some times when, don't start hacking yet. The question is, why are we having the meeting? Who really needs to be there, and what is the purpose of it? And thinking very carefully, because meetings are something that managers set up because it makes them feel good about what they're doing. And you want to focus on shortening the meeting time as much as possible. Because you're burning a lot of people's time. Now, what you've got by Saturday, your latest status report, watch one podcast. Here's our next book, Accelerate. Now, this is a bit of a risk for me because Accelerate mostly talks about technologies and practices that I personally have not used on software projects. But I was involved this summer in consulting with a multinational insurance company as part of a group. And they came to OSG, my old boss, and said, we want recommendations on direction for our information technology processes going forward. And I was part of a team that put together the recommendation there. And the other team members actually have used this stuff a lot. DevOps, CI/CD, containers, microservices, so on and so forth. And this was a book that one of them recommended to me, and I read it, and I swapped out an existing book for this one because I think it is worth all of you to read this to see where the future of high-performing software engineering groups is right now. You need to read chapters, and again, it's a pretty fast read. Chapters 1 through 6 for next week, and then another set of chapters for the following week. Start Webster number 7. These are all my pitfalls. These are, big foreshadowing here. The Webster number 7 pitfalls will be very useful for a lot of your midterm questions because they are common. These are pitfalls that I originally wrote in my book, Pitfalls for Object-Oriented Development, 20 years ago. And then when I revisited them, I said, there's nothing specific. For these particular ones, there's nothing specific about object technology. This happens with any new technology or methodology. These are the mistakes that get made. And we'll discuss that in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, we'll have your first demos. We'll talk about Accelerate 7 through 11, 16. We'll talk about Webster number 7. We'll prep for the midterm, which will simply be me showing you again a sample question like we have on my first day thing, and talking about it. Midterm, we'll have a 15 to 18 hour window on the 19th. It'll be 3 hours time from the time you start. I'll talk about this all in 2 weeks. And then you will have nothing due, that's Thanksgiving week. You'll have nothing due the rest of the week. No podcast, no status report, nothing. The following Monday after Thanksgiving, I've got to decide what we're going to do for lecture besides simply going over the midterms. I'll have all the midterms graded by then. And then it's sort of downhill from there, folks. Once the midterm's in place, your focus, you've got a few more podcasts to watch. You've got one more reading assignment, Webster 8. And it's just finishing your project. So really, you get almost everything out of the way, except for the coding, almost everything out of the way for Thanksgiving. Which will also free up time, because there's no final exam. Free up time. So that's what we're doing, and go study for your other midterms.